doctors wade along the peerless Riva degli Schiavoni, one of the most wondrous streets in the world, and knew that any minute now they would enter his great white palace. The Doge's skin chilled, as if sea spray had doused him. He leaned his head against the cool quarrels of glass, and shut his eyes for one blessed instant. If he hadn't done so, he might have seen a Venetian galleass sailing swiftly away on the dark and swelling waters. But he did close his eyes for a couple of heartbeats, just to be still and breathe in the salt ether. The smell of Venice. Sebastiano Venier straightened up, reminding himself who he was, where he was. He looked at the delicate stonework of his windows, the finest Venetian glazing keeping the thunder of the sea from his ears. He looked up, tilting his noble head to the ceiling, and the peerless frescoes of red and gold, painted over hundreds of years by the finest Venetian artists, covering the cavernous, glorious space above. And yet, all the riches and the glory could not keep the pestilence from his door. The Doge settled in his great chair and waited for the doctors to be announced. They filed in, dripping, and semicircled him like vultures, the red crystal eyepieces set into their masks glittering hungrily, as if ready to peck the very flesh of him. But the moment they began to speak, the Doge ceased to be afraid of them. "We had expected it, my lord," said one. "In the botanical gardens of the Gesuti, there have been of late unusual number of butterflies, hundreds upon thousands of them." The Doge raised a single winter-white brow. "Butterflies?" The doctor, failing to register the steel in the Doge's tone, prattled on. "Why, Doge, butterflies are well known to be harbingers of pestilence." "It is true," chimed in another. "There have been other signs, too. There is a bakery in the Arsenale, and when you tear the loaves in twain, the bread itself begins to bleed." The Doge rapped his fingertips on the arm of his chair. "The fact that the pestilence has arrived in Venice is not a matter for debate. The question is how to best treat the plague." It was no use. One physician wanted to combat the pestilence by advising his patients to wear a dead toad around the neck. The next advised backing a live pigeon into the patient's swollen bubbos in the groin and armpit, so that the tail feathers could draw out the poison. They began to talk over one another, their beaks almost clashing, the masks now ridiculous, the doctor's learned, mellow voices raised in pitch until they were quaking like so many ducks. The Doge, irritated, found his attention wandering. These physicians were charlatans, buffoons, each one more self-important than the next. His eyes drifted to the shadow of an arras, where a man, an old man like himself, stood listening, waiting for the moment when the Doge would call him forth and tell him why he had been summoned. The old man in the shadows, who happened to be an architect, was not really listening either. Always more interested in buildings than people, he was admiring how the stone cross ribs above his head described the curve of the ceiling, and how the proportions of the pilasters complemented the great panels of the frescoes. Like the Doge, he had felt an initial jag of fear when he had seen the doctors enter the room. Everyone, from the Doge to the meanest beggar, knew what the masks meant. The plague was in the city. But the architect was not overly concerned. There had been a minor outbreak of plague 2 years ago.